The year is 1973. The Watergate scandal is exploding. The government is in panic mode. Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, makes a phone call to the technical services staff. He gives a single terrifying order: destroy everything. He orders the destruction of all files, all tapes, and all transcripts related to top secret program codename MKUltra. He wants to wipe the slate clean. He wants to ensure that no one, not the president, not the Congress, and definitely not you, ever finds out that the United States government spent 2 decades trying to master mind control. He almost pulled it off, but like every great mob boss knows, you can burn the bodies, but you always get caught on the taxes. Helms destroyed the operational files, but he forgot to destroy the financial records. In 1977, a clerk found 7 boxes of budget files misfiled in a warehouse, 20,000 pages of receipts, receipts for LSD, receipts for brothels, receipts for electric shock machines. Today we are reading those receipts. We are going to reconstruct the most infamous illegal program in history, not through rumors, but through specific document codes they tried to burn. To understand the documents, we have to first understand the fear. In the early 1950s, the CIA was convinced the Soviets and the Chinese had cracked the code of the human mind. They saw American POWs in Korea denouncing their country. They saw political prisoners in the Eastern Bloc confessing to crimes they didn't commit. The CIA didn't think this was torture. They thought it was technology. Enter Sidney. He was the head of the CIA's chemical division, a man who drank goat's milk, practiced folk dancing, and spent his days trying to invent a pill that could turn a man into a slave. The program was authorized on April 13th, 1953. The cryptonym is fascinating. MK equals the diagraph for the technical services staff. Ultra, the highest level of classification. We have a declassified memo from 1953 where the scope is defined. Document number CIA-RDP83-01040R0008000100003-1. The goal was to develop chemical and biological materials capable of, quote, promoting the intoxicating effect of alcohol, rendering the induction of hypnosis easier, and producing amnesia for events preceding and during the interrogation. End quote. They weren't just looking for a truth serum. They were looking for a way to reprogram a human being, and to do that they needed test subjects. Lots of them. This is where the receipts get wild. Let's look at MKUltra Subproject 3. The CIA hired a man named George Hunter White. He was a federal narcotics agent, a rough and tumble guy who hated hippies and loved gin. Sidney hired him to run a safe house in San Francisco, but it wasn't a safe house. It was a trap. We have the financial records approving the lease and renovations for an apartment on Telegraph Hill. The receipts show payments for electronic surveillance equipment and contractors. Who were the contractors? Prostitutes. The operation was called Midnight Climax. The plan: George White would pay sex workers using CIA cash to lure men back to the apartment. The women would sleep LSD into the men's drinks. Meanwhile, George White would be sitting behind a two-way mirror drinking a martini, watching the whole thing and filming it. Why? Science. They wanted to see if sex could be used to extract secrets from a drugged mind. We have a quote from George White himself years later reflecting on his time in the program. This isn't a document, this is a confession of the vibe. Quote, I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? End quote. That was the man your tax dollars were funding in 1955. The receipts from Subproject 3 are hilarious if you ignore the darkness. We find expense reports for portable toilets, liquor, and even magician supplies. The CIA was literally funding a frat party in San Francisco hoping to accidentally discover mind control. If Operation Midnight Climax was the party focusing on observation, Subproject 68 was the torture chamber. This is the darkest part of the archive. Again, that's Subproject 68. The CIA began funding Dr. Ewan Cameron at McGill University in Montreal. Cameron was a psychiatrist who believed he could cure schizophrenia by erasing the patient's mind and rebuilding it. He called it depatterning. The CIA called it exactly what we are looking for. We have the funding documents. The CIA routed the money through a front organization called the, quote, Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, end quote, to hide the source. Cameron's methods involved 3 stages detailed in his reports. Sleep therapy. He would put patients into a drug-induced coma for weeks or months. psychic driving. He would play a tape loop of repeated phrases like, "You are a failure," hundreds of thousands of times while the patient was sedated, wiring the speakers into their pillows. 3. Electroconvulsive shock. He used shock therapy at voltages 20 to 40 times higher than the standard medical dose, multiple times a day. The goal was to wipe the mind, make it a clean slate, a blank slate, so he could write a new personality onto it. The victims were not spies. They were Canadian citizens, housewives with postpartum depression, men with anxiety. They went to the doctor for help, and the CIA paid for them to be turned into vegetables. When the financial records came out in 1977, the Canadian government was furious. It sparked international lawsuits, but because Helms had destroyed the medical files, many victims could never prove what was done to them. All we had were the payment records. The CIA bought the equipment that fried their brains, and we have the receipt. Did it work? Did they ever create a Manchurian candidate? There is a persistent rumor that the assassin of Robert Kennedy was a product of this program. He claimed he had no memory of the shooting. Do we have a document for that? No. But we do have documents showing the CIA's obsession with executive action, assassination. Sidney, the head of MKUltra, was personally involved in making poison pills intended for Fidel Castro. We have testimony from the Church Committee hearings in 1975. In the hearings, they displayed a dart gun developed by the CIA that could fire a frozen toxin tip that would melt inside the body, leaving no trace, a perfect murder weapon. Sidney testified that he delivered poison pills to a CIA asset in the Congo intended to kill Patrice Lumumba. The mind control and assassination programs were born in the same lab. So why did it stop? According to the surviving documents, it stopped because it was a failure. In a 1975 testimony, Sidney admitted, quote, "The conclusion from all these activities was that it was not possible to manipulate human behavior in this way." End quote. They spent millions, they ruined lives, they drugged unwitting Americans and Canadians in bars, and in the end, the human mind was too resilient to be hacked. Or that's just what they told Congress. The only reason we know any of this, the only reason I can give you is subproject numbers like 3 and 68 is because someone filed a box of paperwork in the wrong warehouse. That is the scariest part of the story. It's not the drugs, it's not the hypnosis, it's the fact that if Richard Helms had been just a little more thorough, if that one clerk hadn't found those financial records, Operation Midnight Climax would be nothing more than a conspiracy theory today. How many other programs didn't leave a financial paper trail? How many other sub-projects were successfully shredded? We have the receipts for MKUltra, but we don't have the receipts for what came next. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the CIA's mad science era. We've talked about mind control, but did you know the CIA also had a program dedicated to parapsychology? You need to check out my episode on Project Stargate if you didn't know that. It involves reading documents where the U.S. Army tried to train soldiers to walk through walls and kill goats by staring at them. If you want to see the tax dollars at work in the weirdest way possible, hit that like button and subscribe. And remember, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that they aren't dosing your drink. See you in the archives.